I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Wiradjuri Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
I always say, and my wife gets frustrated, but I hate going away in summer because I like feeling how the vines feel. And she's like, well, you can, someone can send you a photo or something. And I said, no, I need to walk them and feel them and see them and just watching them each day and how they're reacting to the weather and changing.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.
Tom Ward is one of those characters that knows a little something about everything. He is the viticulturist, winemaker, business owner and operator of Swinging Bridge Wines. Tom simply doesn't do anything by halves. He is one of the most down-to-earth and passionate people in wine and an esteemed voice in the industry. Hi Tom, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks Shanteh. It's great to be with you today.
I was saying to you earlier that I thought about you when I first started this podcast, and I thought I've got to get Tom on because he's such a great speaker and he is just a wealth of knowledge. And I don't know why it's taken me so long. So thanks so much for being patient.
Well, it's been, a long time waiting for this phone call, Shanteh. There's many phone calls in my life I've been wanting, or emails, and when yours came through, I thought, there's that box to be ticked. So, no, it's great. Like, I always enjoy your podcast, and it's great to be asked to, tell a bit of our story today, hopefully, and people could find that a bit interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way they can't. I remember when I first met you, and I remember we were discussing the wines, and then we were discussing a little bit about different clones that you're planting. And I remember thinking, I hadn't quite really kind of done my research, and I was like, how come this guy knows everything? Like, what is he, the sales rep, the owner? I just couldn't quite work it out. And then I realized, you do everything.
Yeah, no, my wife would say I'm a bit obsessed in some ways. I suppose it's probably my whole life, and that's where people say it's what I talk about. And, people might say, you talk about wine. That's what I do most days. Most of my phone calls involve either viticulture, winemaking, sales, all those things. They always say find a passion and work in it, and you'll never work a day in your life. And I never sort of think I chased wine, but I fell into it in a way. And it's sort of one of those things. The more each day I realise that a blessing is. It's something that I do enjoy getting up and being around and being part of, I suppose, of a community.
Well, I'm so glad that you love it that much because, like you said, it's not something that you can really survive in if you don't love it. But where did that first kind of moment with wine take hold where you decided it was something that you really wanted to dedicate yourself to?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, like everyone, I suppose, well, not everyone, a lot of people in the 90s, we had the vine boom. And I've been very lucky, come from a farming family, and we'd always been, in agriculture, and I'd always been interested in farming the land and, obviously fifth generation farmer, or even longer. My father had come from England, but my mother's family had been farming in that area since 1867. So I always enjoyed farming. And then in the mid-90s, my father, I remember he came to me and said, we're going to put a vineyard in there. He said, we've had 4 large companies approach us and they've given us these 10-year contracts. Like he said, I'm lucky to get a 1-year contract or a 3-month contract, let alone a 10-year contract. And he said, I've looked through and I can't find anything wrong. And anyway, in 1995, we started putting our first vineyard in, and that was just when I started university. And I was like, I might help out here. And it just one of those things that the moment I started was the moment I realised that that's probably where I was going to go. I just enjoyed every moment of it, being in the vineyard and being part of the story.
Incredible, a 10-year contract. I wonder how often that happens these days. Was it any moment that your family, or even your mother, was thinking it was kind of a risky move to kind of go into vines when there weren't a huge amount planted in the area?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting because my parents originally were in Canoundra, so it was Cowra Chardonnay at the day was going off. Cowra Chardonnay was almost the benchmark in what was happening around the place, and that really led the craze. So it was my mother and my father, but it was actually my uncle and my auntie, so my mother's brother, and he was right into it and could see the potential. And he's a bit younger than my father, and he was one of the catalysts that really, Dad said if my uncle hadn't been involved, he probably wouldn't have done it, but my uncle really pushed forward and was the catalyst, and my father and my uncle both set it up together and both worked in it together, and that was a really nice thing to be part of and to see them. They're both great farmers and both skilled at what they do, and see them to apply themselves into the viticulture realm was pretty amazing to watch and to be part of it. And then, as time went on, then to be lucky enough that they asked me to come and work for them was a really nice thing.
Tell me a little bit, in terms of your parents, were they wine drinkers themselves?
I think, like everyone, we had cask in the fridge. I remember working out the difference. It was the difference between, well, you only had white and red. I didn't realise there was varieties, and we only used to have the Burgundy and the Chablis and the cask in the fridge, I remember. And I remember quite proudly when, finally actually understanding that we had these varieties. But Mum and Dad weren't. No one really in around area. You always had it as a little, a bit of cask wine or a glass here or there. But I can't really remember wine being a huge part. I mean, I was one of 5 kids. I don't think Mum and Dad had time, to be honest. And then, I think that as we got into the wine industry and sort of fell in love, and I now know Mum and Dad are very good consumers of wine, have travelled the world and really enjoy some of the finer things in wine. They've enjoyed that journey, but it's sort of taken it on hand in hand, I suppose, with me and my journey, I suppose, that I've come along and helped them. But we weren't, experts in the wine field at all. We were more just farmers who, enjoyed our craft of viticulture. Well, at the time we were in lucerne, lamb, cropping and things like that, and just trying to perfect an art. And I think that's probably where I got that passion from my father. Really trying to make sure that we, did it well. And Dad, if he did something, we did it well, and that's where the viticulture side came. But there was no predisposed. We used to get sent. We grew for Southcorp at the time, now Treasury Wines, and I remember them sending their wine list, and you could get stuff for $2 or $3, I think, for some very cheap rough reds, and we thought they were amazing. So we invested heavily in those. I think my 21st had a lot of those rougher reds, and we thought they were amazing.
I love that. And, whether or not, in hindsight, what kind of quality wines they were, the fact that you thought they were fantastic at the time only fuels that passion as it's growing and as your palate's changing. So I kind of love that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really nice thing. I look at the wines I used to think were amazing, and we used to grow for Lindemann's Bin 65. And look, it's an amazing value wine, but I don't think there'd be much Bin 65 in my fridge these days. But we used to, that was the one that Mum and Dad used to buy to support, because they were so, such big supporters of the company that was buying our fruit and wanted to tell that story. And that was a really great story in the 90s. I think hand in hand, a lot of the growers were working in with those big companies, and that's probably been something that has been lost over the last, decade or so, and it's a bit sad, but, it's also probably been commercialities.
Oh, definitely. Fast forward a little bit and tell me, from the moment that you were on selling your grapes to the decision around deciding to keep the grapes yourself and bottle them under your own label, how did that come about?
Yeah, no, it's sort of a very long story, in a sense that we used to be a very large grower. So Mum and Dad, we grew a lot for Treasury, that 10-year contract. We thought that was great, and we planted more, and it was, it was never going to end. And let me tell you, it ended. We were making, and I remember my uncle at the time saying, well, we might just get a little bit of wine made. And someone put us in touch with a guy called Murray Smith, who's Knobbler Smith Wines. Now, I don't know if you know much about Murray, but he is certainly a character. And making wine, he selected whether or not he'd make your wine. It wasn't really, and it wasn't one that it was done with him being a patient man. E.g., you had to be patient when Murray decided to be bottled. It might be a year or 2 years. It depended how the wine, but he's a very skilled winemaker, and it was very basic, a tonne here, 2 tonne there, like very small. So Mum and Dad and my uncle, Dad used to hand label it on the, I've got some of the older bottles hand labeled on the coffee table. And I can tell you now, I don't think there's one label that's straight. Dad would tell you they're all straight, but he's not a man for labelling. I haven't asked him to come and help in labelling since, I can tell you. But that's how we first started. So look, when you say we did a bit of wine, we're doing, let's say, 2 tonne, and we're producing somewhere of 800 to 900 tonne of growing for the bigger companies. And that was in those days. And if I look back in how everyone was doing it, they made a little bit on the side, or you may have, if you grew for a big company in the Hunter, you might just say, listen, can you bottle just a couple of barrels on the side for me, or something like that. There was no real, taking the grape to the winery and that sort of passion of that small crafting of the wine, and that's sort of been the massive change. So that was where it sort of happened. And then I, in my history, I was working up in Orange for a guy called Justin Jarrett, who's Seesaw Wines, and I happened to, when I left university, I was going to go anywhere in Australia, and I ended up being on the same two-way channel as my parents. That's how close. So, the old UHF, Mum and Dad used to be able to hear on the UHF what I was doing during the day. That's how close we were. Could have been anywhere in Australia, and UHF, 30 kilometres is generally, or you've got to be at line of sight. So we were up higher in Orange looking down on mum and dad. So I'd come home, or when I first came back from uni, and they'd know everything I'd done during the day. So I was working with Justin, and we were growing, planting a lot of grapes, and the orange region, it was expanding rapidly. And I did that for a while. And then as part of that journey, I then decided to go overseas and do vintages, and then got into winemaking. So I went and did winemaking over in America. And then the drought of 2003 hit. So very dry period, 02, 03, 04. And my father then rang me and said, you're having fun overseas, but it might be time for you to grow up. Time to come home and become a wage earner or provide. So I then got married and moved home with my wife, Georgie, and that was that was in 03. And at that time when I came home, I just said to Dad, listen, I'd really like to start making a bit of wine and just doing a little bit. So we just made a little bit on the side, and as that evolved through to about 09, we then started making more and more, just selling a little bit of those on the side. And then in 09, when the big grape glut really hit, Dad made the decision that we'd actually get out of grape growing per se and just move into own branded product, and I took over the whole reins of the whole wine business in 08. So that's sort of in a nutshell quickly how all that happened. And there's been many ups and downs in that journey, but the one thing I've been very lucky is, I always have the support of my parents in saying that, and they really let me have my vision, and also my wife in that, because it's a journey of passion, and if you're not passionate, then it's the wine industry can be a pretty tough journey.
Yeah, that's for sure. I love that as you start to learn more about Swinging Your Bridge and more about the story, the bottlings and kind of ode to your family and its legacy is told within the kind of labels and the stories. So it's really kind of cements, especially if someone's selling your wines or recommending them, it really kind of cements the story in, because you're reminded again of where the awards and patents came from and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I always say, and I'm very lucky to every day tell my family story in the cellar door. And look, everyone's got family and everyone's got a story. I'm just lucky enough that I'm able to tell that, and people are interested in that every day. And I've been very lucky to have a family that's been really loving and enabled me to do what I do, and supportive, and that's been an amazing thing. And then to be able to tell that story through our wine and probably, I suppose, the passion I've got, because my family's always been passionate about community and where they come from, and that's part of what I've always believed in and want to showcase to my children and those next generations. I'm very lucky that hopefully we can cement that in history and make sure those stories are told forever.
That's definitely something I wanted to touch on, which I'll get a little bit back to later in terms about community. Yep. But tell me a little bit about the viticulture of orange. Like you said, you're from Canowindra originally, and then there was a boom and you saw the promise of orange. What did you enter into in terms of viticulture? What was the landscape like, and how drastically has it changed over the years?
I chuckle a little because, I remember we had consultants come over, and when I first started there in 99, we didn't even know how to prune. We were really just training them up. We knew how to trellis because we could do that well, and we knew how to plant the vines, but pruning, we hadn't quite got to that in a sense. Look, none of us sort of really knew. And, for a young person like myself, the only thing you really had to do was say, I'm going to work hard and learn. And that's what we all did. And we all, always really worked collaborative together, the region. And I think that's so I laugh when I say we couldn't even prune really, but we're always going to learn, or we'll pay the best people to come and show us and learn from it. It's always been about that. So the region of Orange, when we first started, very limited, even canopy management, pruning. We used to yield crops very high compared to what we do. I reckon we'd halve the yields about what we half of the yield now is what we get, what we used to. So we've gone from this sort of, prune it. You had some foliage-wise there, you just leave them there, and maybe you might do one lift. There'd be no trimming unless it got so hairy you had to get closer to it, so you wouldn't trim, there wouldn't be any leaf plucking, there'd be certainly no shoot thinning, so you'd be dropping crop or anything. God forbid that you'd be looking to drop crop, because if you could, produce crop, you could sell it. And that's been a massive change to now where, it's to me and our brand and what we do and the people that I work with, it's all about the end product and making sure we've got the right product for that, because there's no room for wines that aren't appropriate for what we want. There's no problem. We don't want wines that don't speak of the place we're from, the character we're from, and it's the attention to detail that we're known for. That's the main thing. If keeping the attention to detail, and I was saying this to someone the other day, I think we do about 11 passes by human each growing season. We would have used to have done 3, I think. So, to look at how much work now goes into that canopy management, the production, I can't ever remember making a good wine from really bad fruit. But I can remember making some great wines from great fruit, and I can also remember making bad wines from great fruit. So you got to start off with a great product to start off with, and then carry it through in making great decisions in the winery. But you don't want to start off with a bad product at the start, and that's where I think that growth in Orange has occurred. I mean, Orange is a pretty unique location, elevation-wise. So Orange is a region's defined as 600 metres elevation and above, and we've grown up to Mount Canobolas, and the majority of our vineyards, which is 1,400 metres, a majority of our vineyards are at 900. That's relevant in the sense that that's pretty cool marginal area. Anything above 1,100, you're going to really even struggle to ripen as a crop. So it showcases, I think, and some people don't quite realise the elevation and how cool Orange does get. That elevation story is a really important part, and that's where we've got not only a macro climate we operate in Orange, it's the very microclimates as well that we've seen develop. So all these beautiful little sites on hills and in valleys and creeks. There's so many different areas and also aspects as well. So a lot of us are working on not only different aspects, a southern facing aspect, eastern facing aspect, but also looking now even at row orientation. A lot of that's even changing. And then, as you said earlier, even clonal wise, there's been a huge renewal in Orange into looking at all the different clones, especially in Pinot and Chardonnay, but also then making sure we're even putting them on a rootstock. I mean, we never put anything on rootstock. I mean, literally in the 90s, 2000s, if you got rootlings, you'd just chuck them in the ground. You didn't really care if they were certified or not at the time because you couldn't get access to it. So it's been that real improvement in every facet of what we're trying to do through the planting material, row orientation, aspect of the rows, vine spacing. I mean, a lot of people are now looking at 1.25 metre spacings between vines rather than we used to all do it at 2 metres. I mean, that was the cost cutting. You spread them out as far as you can and then yield them up, but that's caused other problems as well and very limited with pruning. You do permanent cordon rather than cane prune sort of thing. So, for me, the viticulture is probably the most exciting thing that's evolved the most in the region and continuing to evolve, and that's the challenge. And I'm so proud to see how much it has evolved and how much everyone's worked together on that.
Yeah, I mean, there has been so much change, and you have been a huge part of, I think, communicating, what Orange does best and why it's unique. Can you give me a little bit of for the people listening, a little bit of an idea of those kind of change in daytime, nighttime temperatures and elevation? How does that affect grapes?
Yeah, no, it's a really, I said to people, it's almost like a 6 years of viticulture university to give you in a 2-minute spiel. It's a complicated thing in a way, but it's not so much. That 600 metres is where Orange Orange is the only region defined by elevation in Australia. 75 GI regions, and Orange is the only one that's purely defined by an elevation matrix. Everything else is sea, mountains, etc. But every 100 metres you go up is roughly, well, I always say 1 degree, but it's actually about 0.7 degree cooler. So if you're going 500 metres up, it's about 4 degrees cooler. So you're seeing that in the daytime, and then obviously nighttime you've got going to get that even cooler temperature. You've also got the north, south and flat aspect of them. So you've roughly, if you go a northern aspect on a flat aspect will be 1 degree warmer, and a southern aspect will be 1 degree cooler. So chucking all those variables in, and then you've also got your row orientation, obviously with that sun, because we do have a high UV index up in Orange. But then looking at the grape ripening, so grapes ripen by this, heat summation unit. So it's growing degree day. So as a rough rule of thumb, we calculate it from the 1st of October through to our harvest time. So grapes, they're a bit like children. They've got to go through growth phases. So they start at the age of 1, etc., etc. They don't go at the age of 1 and then suddenly turn 19 and you're going to be picking the next day. They've actually got to go through all those steps when you go through them. So you've got to get your leaf development. You've then got to get inflorescence. They've got to flower. The grapes have then got to form. And so there's all those stages. And what you can make them go faster with is heat summation units. So that's what makes the vine tune, the photosynthesis. And really the rule of thumb is anything above 19 degrees, you're going to get some form of photosynthesis and some sort of ripening process occurring in your grape ripening. So above 19, now orange struggles to get above 19 a lot in the October, in those overnight teams. So you're not getting that full 24-hour operation of it. And some days in orange, it's 12 and 13 this week, and in orange, it can get very cool. And then the other thing is the vines, once they get over about 34, 35, they actually start shutting down to stop evapotranspiration as well. So, they'll actually stop going over that the ripening. So it's trying to get in that middle area, and the grapes have to grow these, accumulate these summations of these heat days to ripen. So, varieties such as Riesling, Champagne base, if you use, your Chardonnay or your Pinot, use a lot less. They don't need as much. So the cooler climate areas, such as orange, you'll see a lot of those prevalent varieties such as Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Gourds, Traminer, Pinot Gris, they need less, whereas your Cabernet and your Shirazes as well need a lot more heat summation units. You can obviously vary that, or some of the areas are more patient. So Grenache, some of those bigger, bolder reds, they need more heat summation. So that's why you see those varieties out of orange that we do. But the beauty is we've also got some lower elevations out at 600 that the Shiraz and Cabernet do ripen at. You just got to find the right sites and all that. So it's the orange's biggest problem is it's so varied, which is sort of a great problem. But on the other hand, it's not just one singular variety that defines us. And that's always been oranges. And it's not it's a great problem to have, but it's always been the thing about oranges. It's sort of from 600 down up to 1100, you've got, big, bold reds at 600 up to trying to ripen sparkling base. So it's such a varied story, and we're really lucky as a winemaker and a viticulturist to have that. But it's sometimes, you do tear your hair out thinking, golly, we've got all these different things to think about, and it's so many macro and micro climates to deal with.
Yeah, I suppose that for people that are driving out to Orange and maybe listening to this podcast on the way and thinking about where they want to eat dinner and what wineries they want to visit, it's hard because, like you said, you can't kind of just take a bite and think, okay, now I've digested exactly what Orange is all about. It really changes from cellar door to cellar door and what they've got planted and what their philosophies are. But you've really summed up beautifully what Mount Canobolas does in terms of elevation.
I hope so because I hope so, because it is quite, when you go into that viticulture and, the GDD. But the one thing I would say to everyone is make sure you bring a jumper, because you may need it any time of the year. It's one of those places that you don't want to get caught. I always have a jumper in the ute at any time of the year. You can always get caught out, so I always have one in there and a rain jacket.
That's a very good idea. I didn't do that the first time I came, and it got down to something crazy minus something ridiculous at nighttime. And I luckily I was at a place that had wonderful heating and I was okay, but we weren't doing any vineyard walks at night.
You learn that lesson once. Yes, you learn the lesson once and you never make the mistake again.
I love that. Now, when you talk about yourself, how do you describe what you do? Do you say that you're a viticulturist first, or a winemaker, or you're an owner? How do you kind of put down all the jobs that you do, and how, if you introduce yourself, what would you say?
That's a really good question. I probably take that back to when it's not that I could be arrogant. What am I good at? Is probably where I look at what do I think feel the most comfortable in, and that's walking the vineyard. So that's probably great love, or what I would argue I feel most at home with, and where I feel that I can really add value, or really create our wine. Don't get me wrong, the other aspects are extremely important, but that's the one area that sounds bad. I wouldn't outsource, I suppose, in a sense, walking the vines, doing the viticulture. I always say, and my wife gets frustrated, but I hate going away in summer because I like feeling how the vines feel. And she's like, well, someone can send you a photo or something. And I said, no, I need to walk them and feel them and see them, and just watching them each day and how they're reacting to the weather and changing. And viticulture, I think winemaking sometimes can be a bit more fixed, and you've got them inside a winery. It's a lot more process, driven. Whereas the vineyard, if you ever, think it's all easy and you've got a fixed process, you'll throw it out the door. You've got to be able to be nimble on your feet and constantly change and evolve to the season. No season's the same. We've just seen that with 21, 22, 23 been extremely cool. After 17, 18, 19, 20, they're extremely warm. And then you also get rain events and all these things that come in through the season. You've got to vary and continually be proactive. So if you ask me, where you generally say vigneron, I suppose that covers a lot of things, but I'd love to think that, people remember that vineyards is where the great wines are made, and that's something that we try to really specialise in and make sure we put that extra time in, because if you don't have great fruit, as I said earlier, you're not going to make great wine.
It's true, and I've heard someone once say that if you really want to meet a good viticulturist, look at their hands, because they'll always be filthy. And I feel like, you are somebody that not has filthy hands, but that is at home in the vineyard. And when you speak about it, your eyes kind of light up. And I've always enjoyed that, because it's the tiny difference between leaf and bunch structure that, when you get going, I just think, oh, this is where he just absolutely thrives.
Yeah, I love taking people out into the vineyards, and we do tour group. When we do some cellar door tours, or part of it's a vineyard tour, and I always think, oh God, no one's going to really be interested, and what we take, or I might be just showing them what we're doing, and just the people are fascinated, and then might start one question to the next, and I feel very comfortable having those discussions, and you sort of think, oh no, I won't have much knowledge about this, and then you suddenly realise that the 25 plus years or 27 years now I've been in vineyards, you do know how to deal with vines in training, pruning, very comfortable in understanding what the vine's looking like, feeling like, and working with that. And I suppose I've done it all virtually all my life, so it's not something I think too much, but people just, are amazed at how comfortable probably I feel in the vines, and hopefully convey that to people, because, it's something that, they're a living plant, and, working with them and dealing with them, you've got to, be adapted to what they want and what they need, because in the end we're trying to bring a product and make sure that end product's the best that we can then deal with it at the next process, which is a bit more fixed in turning that sugar into an alcohol product.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the wines that you make, because you have quite a few varieties now, and you have some beautiful bottlings of signature series down to your hashtag series, tell me a little bit about, is there a wine that you find challenging each year, or that you take really seriously and, is kind of your baby?
I always get asked what my favourite wine is, and I said it's a bit like children. They've all got their moments. Look, I think the biggest one that is probably keeping me up at night at the moment, it's probably Pinot. And I don't say that because I don't think we've got a pathway forward on it. It's more from the sense that it is such a tricky grower. And just when you think, I've got this sorted, but it doesn't like growing up straight. You've got to work really hard in the vineyard. It can throw massive crops. You've got to thin, and then terrible flowering. And then you've got to be so patient with getting it ripe and getting, and then it's such a fickle variety. So it's probably the one that I'm passionate about trying to define Pinot Noir from orange. I'm passionate about where that stands for the region. It's something that I've been trying to lead for 10 years plus now, and we've put a lot of different clones into the ground. We've put a lot of effort into the viticulture. Been down to Mornington, Yarra, Tassie, New Zealand, over to Burgundy, really trying to make sure we can get the knowledge base out of it all and make sure that we can take that and you got to adapt it to your region. Orange, high elevation, high UV, so it's got some obviously got the diurnal differences in temperatures, the highs and the lows that we do. So you've got to make sure your viticulture is adaptable to that. That's probably the wine that we put a lot into the oak program, fermentation, cold soak, trying to make sure we're using the right oak, all those things. So it's probably the wine that I'm excited by working on it further and evolving quickly, and that's a really nice thing. But if you in a nutshell, if there's a wine I probably think that defines us at the moment, it's probably some of our single vineyard Chardies is probably where I'm, probably looking at them kind of happy or kind of proud. And that's, someone that, I'm not, I just sort of look at them and I look at a lot of wines, but for me, it's something I look at it and go, wow, I think we're really showcasing what Orange can do here, and that's exciting because I didn't think we'd ever get here as quickly or as where we are at the moment, and that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's always good to look at the varieties that you produce in the region and then how they kind of benchmark against other regions as well, because it showcases their differences or all of the likes. And you do a lot of that by, your judging, but also by your experience in different associations. And I wanted to bring up the fact that you were president for New South Wales Wine for over 6 years, 7 years. What did that role teach you?
It taught me so much. It's one of those things that's great to do. I used to be in a very lucky opportunity where I'd sit in meetings with ministers and, not that it's a non-paid role and, so you're only there if you're passionate. And I think, you sit there with government ministers, or I've done a lot with the Governor of New South Wales and who's now the Governor General, and these people who really could see your passion. They really enjoyed your take on it because they understood that, it was an association that was run by winemakers and grape growers, and we really we didn't have to be there, but it enabled me to get skills that I think if I'd gone into the corporate area, I would never have got. I was very lucky or persistent or stubborn. I think they're all probably what it was, but I just kept putting my hand up to help. And I always say to younger people, when they say, oh, I can't get in or there's not an opportunity, I'm like, did you put your hand up again? And they're like, I'm saying, you keep going. Because people won't say no, and if they do, ring me and I'll make sure I'll ring someone and say, get out of the way. We've got to let younger people, and I was very lucky in that chance. I kept putting it up. I had great mentors like David Lowe from Lowe Wines in Mudgee, who really let me have opportunity, get out there. I had some, really great people that allowed me to learn, on the job, and great structure. I had some great executive officers that really supported me. It's great to be out in the front of the meeting, but you need someone to, take the notes, action things and deliver. And I've been really lucky to have that support. And then I had great committees. So, I think New South Wales Wine has come a long way as, dealing with, you got to remember New South Wales Wine only exists primarily for one reason, and that is to deal with the New South Wales government or what is relevant to the New South Wales government. So, that's the state-based stuff like Department of Primary Industries. So we had to do a lot with the smoke issues and a lot of those things, the fires and the floods. So, to be dealing with, I was very lucky to have these relationships with ministers. And I mean, Noel Blair, who was the Minister of Ag at one stage, I still remember on a Sunday morning we had fires up on the mountain in Mount Canobolas in Orange in 2018, and phone rang and it was Noel Blair, and he said, you have some fires, and and those people had a great passion for their job, and Noel said, well, here's my personal number, Tom, ring it anytime you need anything. Knowing full well I wouldn't, but that when you got a minister ringing you and saying, here's my personal number, and 24 hours a day you can ring it, it's a pretty amazing thing for, just a humble grape grower, winemaker. And it was a pretty amazing experience to deal with those people that said, listen, we're here to help and whatever you need. But you normally don't ring them and ask them for, a simple thing. You are generally asking them for big favours if you did do it. And that was a pretty amazing opportunity for me. And also, I think I also felt the pressure of that because, you've got other people's businesses, lives, sort of that you're dealing with and representing. And it's something I always made sure I took very seriously in that representation because, these are people's livelihoods you're dealing with and you've got to constantly be representing them and showcasing that and also be passionate to, those levels of government or, even on national associations because we deal into the Australian wine industry and also some of the research bodies to make sure you can convey that where these people were and the passion they had and how these issues or what were happening was affecting their life or how we could, help them further things. So, I still remember chairing meetings as I was drafting sheep one day because we used to have sheep farms and thinking, wow, here, if they only knew I was out drafting sheep, trying to also survive in the wine industry and do these things. But no one cared. They just cared that you were passionate and wanted to lead. And that was the main thing. And I've never had an opposition from anyone about it in the sense that they were just happy that, you were passionate and wanting to showcase and lead the region.
I think that's so wonderful. And I particularly see that in Orange, that there is a real banding together of brands. And, maybe someone could say that, we get the best kind of viewpoint in that everyone's getting along. But for what I have seen and heard over time, I really see a group of people from Orange that all kind of champion each other for the region's benefit. And I think that's perhaps maybe why Orange has made such amazing steps and progression in the last few years.
Yeah, I agree. I remember years ago going to New Zealand, I caught up with the Central Otago guys, and I just sort of was going through that. That was 10 years ago, and they were killing it, around the place and doing really well. And I sort of said, well, how do you handle this? That another brand they called, and one of the guys said to me, we call it cooperation. So you cooperate, but you are in competition. And it's something I took away from that as a really important lesson that, we're always cooperating and working together. But, if you're out in trade and selling wine, well, you've got to sell a product and, you're in competition. You don't do competition in a sense you try and undermine someone. But if your wine gets on a list, good. That's a great thing. And I always say to anyone, I go out to a restaurant or a bottle shop and I see a local wine on there, an orange wine, and I smile because I know that restaurant or bottle shop has already understood the regional story of a region like Orange, and that's only going to make it easier for someone like myself. It doesn't mean I need to barge them off the list. It just means they're open to that conversation. And, we've been really, really lucky in Orange to have a lot of really, really good leaders and ones that are willing to put their hand up, and it's numerous people that have been able to do that. And that's a really exciting thing because, if you can't, you can't all do it with one person, and that's where Orange has been lucky to have this critical mass of a lot of people that are willing to put their hand up. And, even now I look at the committee and I've just stood down from president of the Orange Regional Vineyards Association, but we've got all these young people that are putting their hands up and getting engaged. And I can't tell you that many regions that I know around that's the case. And that's probably the thing that most excites me the most is to see all these younger people and other people that haven't been involved now getting involved. And that's a really exciting thing.
Oh, it's incredible, and it says so much about you as well to be backing, the next generation of who's going to lead the way forward. And I agree, you've got some really exciting, dynamic, shockingly young people that are taking on massive responsibility, and it's so awesome to see.
Yeah, no, I always said everyone I'm the old. I always said when I was 40 I wanted to be off most all the committees. I'm a bit older than that, at 46. But I'm sort of happy that we are moving this side. But that doesn't mean you go forever. You're there to help and come back in if needed or vary. But I certainly don't want to be the one that's holding that up or stopping that. But I want to continue the knowledge base. And, I have the opportunity for the younger ones. And it's the same in our business. I've got some amazing staff and they're all really involved in all the local community organisations. And it's such an important thing because that's what keeps us going is the community. And if we don't have that, then we are nothing. They're the ones that have supported us and part of what we've done over the many, many years, and we'll be there in the long term. So we've got to always constantly remember that. And I always say to my guys, community first, profit second, because if you don't have that, if you want to profit first, community second, you're going to be pretty hollow in the end.
It's a wonderful philosophy to have. And, you always put your, money where your mouth is. You always kind of are the first to kind of just support lots of people, and that goes not just for the region of Orange, but all of New South Wales. And it's such a testament to why your brand is so successful. I think is because of just the way that you lead, your company and the people around you. So amazing job.
Oh, thank you. You don't need to say that, but I mean, it's nice to hear that from some of my peers that is, what they see. But we just want to keep doing the great things that we can do, and hopefully be part of a great community.
Yeah, well, I did call around and ask for some dirt on you, and I didn't really manage. I mean, Jeff Byrne made some things up, but I didn't manage to get anybody to tell me anything terrible. So they must respect you.
Oh yeah. Well, you probably, they probably kept some of the stories from university days away. I was very lucky to go to university with guys like Jeff Byrne, who's now at Byrne Farm in Orange, and Adrian Sparks, who's up at Mount Pleasant, and Liam Anderson from Wild Duck Creek, and we had some great times. I say those days at university, doing we did it as all external students. We had no money, but we had plenty of access to plenty of wine, and that was the great thing. And everyone was always so forthcoming with that, and that's sort of the generosity even at that stage, wine swaps and all those things. So, look, it's nice to have some other people say some nice things about you. It's nice to be part of it, and hopefully that's what people see, because that's what I hope we can convey and do. But it doesn't, we've just got to keep pushing forward as a region and, keep united. And I think the Orange is doing that really well. And also New South Wales and even the Australian wine industry, because there's plenty of negativity out there. But if you focus on negativity, you're not going to get anywhere, and people have got to be actively thinking about how they're going to become sustainable.
Yep. That's no truer words being said. And I have to say, that group of I was going to say boys, but men that you talked about going to university with, I feel like they're the antagonizers. Like, they are the troublemakers. So you had a very particular year, didn't you?
Yeah, look, I don't know. Look, there was some. It was sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you get unlucky. So I think you can work out whether it was lucky or unlucky. But I'm pretty lucky to have them all as friends that I speak to often or convey and see. And the great thing about the wine industry is you keep running into people over a long period of time, and everyone's very united and encouraging. And say we do well in something, the amount of text messages or messages I get from the industry is just amazing. People don't have to do that, but it's a nice thing that it's like getting birthday wishes from people. It's a nice thing. E.g., your birthday yesterday, Shanteh, so happy birthday, by the way. But it's always nice to get those wishes, and you don't do it for those, but it's nice when people acknowledge and they have that presence to think that it's worth giving you some acknowledgement of that and celebrating with you.
I totally agree. Tom, to learn a little bit more about your palate and how you work, if you could only drink 3 drinks for the rest of your life, what would you drink and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it's also good. It's obviously got to be wine. I probably need to make sure it could just be New South Wales wine, and then I'd be right, even orange wine. But I probably need to be a bit more diverse than that. But I suppose if I just think about bottles that define me or wines that will, I was very lucky to try a DRC, so Domaine Romani Conti SSL 67, and I was lucky enough to be chosen to do the Glenevin Institute back in 2012. And it was one of those wines. I remember always people hearing these wines that define them and, showcase them and all those things, and they got them into wine. And I was like, yeah, that would never happen. And I remember having that wine and a blind options at dinner and just going, I get it. That was one of those wines I had once and was like, wow, I can see where Pinot can go. And that was the 67. Still, to this day, I can remember everything about that wine. And they always say that if you can remember about a wine, it defines you and that emotion and that time. And that locked that up for me. Probably another wine that I'm also very passionate about, Chardonnay, but Knobbler Smith. So Murray Smith, used to be Knobbler Smith. Now it's been taken over by a great guy called Jonathan Matic, who's doing amazing things and called Knobbler Wines. But it was an 04 Chardonnay that he made. And I think that Vanya Cullen used to run a Chardonnay challenge, and it went over there to that and cleaned them up. It was one of those wines first defined, I think, what orange could do with Chardonnay. And I still remember having that wine and thinking, here we go. This is a wine that I think orange can really do. And then probably, we alluded to the history of wine. I've also, New South Wales, such an amazing history, but the Hunter probably being the leader in that. Again, I've been really lucky to see some really classic Hunter, I used to call them, Hermitage wines, but a Tulloch 53 wine that I was a Shiraz that we had at New South Wales Wine Awards, or I was very lucky to have, and we think it was a 49 O'Shea, a wine that, whatever it was, 60, 70 years later, and still looked amazing, and I've sat some of those old bottles I've had, and you sort of go, oh, yeah, right, look good as a moment in time, but it's had better days. And those two were pristine examples of a wine that's ageless and tell a story. And, I think in the wine industry, if we're not, sometimes I think some of the wines have been made forgetting to tell the story of what we've done and the vintage and the year and what history's about, and it just becomes about trying to whack the wine out in a sense, about what's the cogs and margins and all those things. And I think if we forget that place and history and time where we've come from, then the wine industry is going to be a pretty lonely place. And that's constantly what I say to people is, we're putting a timestamp on what we're doing. And I see that's when the Hunter were doing those great wines, and they still are. They really starting to nail that. That was a great time. And I think it's really amazing, those 50s and 60s, reds that you can see out of the Hunter. If you ever get a chance to anyone, make sure you go and have a look at them, because they are timeless and they tell a story of that region and where it was coming from.
3 great wines, and as per usual, you're a fantastic storyteller, and I love chatting to you. I always learn something, and I always come away with more appreciation for the world we live in. So thank you, Tom, for joining me. I loved picking your brain. I love hearing more about what you're up to. There's always something weird and wonderful that's making you excited, and it's fantastic to hear. So thanks for spending some time with me today.
It's been a pleasure, Shanteh. I always enjoy talking to you about wine, the world, the people, and also anyone. If they're ever coming out to Orange, please come out, discover the region. Look, Orange has got some amazing websites to describe what we're doing, how we're going, and it's a story of wine and food and culture. And encourage anyone to come and have a chat and have a look through. But I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a region that I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be out there, and I look forward to seeing people out there.
Absolutely. And stop by Swinging Bridge Wines, because there's fantastic Rees, the sommelier out there, wonderful chefs, and you've got an absolute killer lineup of wines. You'll end up being there for hours, and I'll say I told you so.
Oh, thank you, Shanteh. Well, it's always great to have customers. It's always great to be having people that want to taste what we do, see what we do, and enjoy what we do. So if people want to come and do that, we'd love to host them. So thank you.
Sounds awesome. Thanks so much. Cheers to you, Tom, and I'll chat with you later.
Thanks, Shanteh. Look forward to catching up soon.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram @overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.